Good evening. Thank you for joining United Soccer FC. My name is Harry. I'm your host here tonight, once again here. Tonight I have a special guest, Dan, who's the editor and founder of Protagonist Soccer, and who, in my opinion, runs the best coverage of lower league soccer, at least top two. I'll give him that. Dan can also be found on the following Protagonist Soccer podcast, Nights Who Say NISA, Protagonist Weekly, Sightlines, and he also does a 90+1, which is about the U.S. men's national team and U.S. women's national team for that here. So welcome, Dan. Thank you for coming on to the show here. Like I said here, I've followed you probably since the beginning of Protagonist Soccer, I think. 2-3 years ago, I guess?
We're pushing towards 3 years, actually, very soon. But thank you for having me on. And yeah, I've been doing a lot of podcasting. Sometimes when people start listing things, I'm like, oh, wow, I spend way too much time on this. Like, I really should find some other kind of hobby. But I really enjoy podcasting. It's really fun. And it's a pleasure to... Well, let me tell you something. I think that, I'm a big believer in that if you work hard at something, you get better at it. And so I've been working hard on this for a long time. So, while some people started podcasting a year ago or 2 years ago, I was running an MLS podcast before I ever switched over to Protagonist. And that was a good 3 years of practice until I got to the soccer that actually mattered.
I was going to say, I don't know if I remember your MLS years, just because
that was before you. I
don't do a whole lot of MLS. That's one thing that we have probably in agreement nowadays.
Yeah,
for that here. Although I'm dwelling a little bit more with this show, trying to open up a little bit more to MLS than what I did previously. But one of the things that I wanted to, put on here with Protagonist Soccer, like I said here, you run it. I know Joshua Duder up in Portland help out, and you got a whole bunch of team guys that, guys and gals now behind you that kind of help with it here. So just for my listeners and just, so that we can get this out here, how can we help support Protagonist Soccer to help it grow along those lines? What are some of the things that you would like to see from the Protagonist Soccer fan base, and, so that way we can help it grow, even more than what it is now?
Well, I think the key, and I think any content producer would say this, that it comes down to supporting the projects we do. If that means clicking on a link, if that means sharing a link, if that means buying a product that we push, those are ways that you can help us really easily. I guess buying it may be less easy depending on what we're selling, right? But certainly clicking and sharing and subscribing are all things that you can do. We really we live off that. That's how we drive. That's how we create. We've been lucky enough to have some of the best volunteers work with us. We're a volunteer organization. We're donating our time, all of us. That includes me. I don't get paid for this, but it has been a massive success because of the people that have gotten involved. And you mentioned Josh as my assistant editor, and we've added so many great writers from all across the country.
Danielle recently from my old podcast, or not my old podcast, but the other podcast I do.
And Danielle and recently Liz hopped on too out of California. Mm-hmm. And then we have several people that have been I think up to close to 10 now. People that are writing and or podcasting. We're doing both. It's been really amazing. And so that's another way you can help us. If you want to get involved with us, some people think, oh, I can't write. Well, you'd be surprised. I think that.
Well, I just got ripped on Reddit about my grammar, so.
Well, maybe writing's not for you. Just click and share. I'm done with that. So that's that. And then of course, there is the obvious way, which we have a Patreon account.
Yes.
And that's Protagonist Soccer. If you go on there, the great thing about our Patreon, which everyone that's on our Patreon will tell you, is Sticker Club. Basically, even as low as $1 donation, if there are any of those dollar donations available, we limit those because too many people sign up for it. But yes, look at this.
You can get all of these stickers.
Yes, you get tons and tons of stickers. We're pushing stickers out every month. Josh runs that, and that has been probably one of our most successful promotions, if I'm really honest. And I don't want to give Josh too much credit for that, but it definitely was his idea. And I think we're scheduled all the way through the end of 2022 at this point.
Oh, nice.
With stickers and everything's organized. He's one of those guys that, like, give him a project and he wants to kill it. So it's been really successful. And we have some really great projects coming up just in the next couple of months, which I'm not totally at liberty to discuss fully yet, but there's going to be some opportunities for people to purchase things to help us out that we're very excited about.
So you're in Atlanta covering the UPSL Finals. So just to kind of, touch base on that, Olympians FC from Arizona defeated Capital City 3-2 at the late winner from Olympians FC. I think it was around the 84th, 85th minute, if memory serves me correct, after Cap City came back to tie it up down 2-0. And then in the nightcap, Jenga from Georgia, Atlanta, beat Brockton FC United 3-2 as well. But Jenga, had a soft PK. I think, by letter of the law, it was a correct PK call, but it was still kind of soft. Went down to 10 men on another call that, you kind of wonder for, but then scored the next three, but Brockton pushed back. For me, and of course it was at Silverback Park, which as an old NASL alumni, I thought it looked awesome and looked the same, unlike other soccer parks from, those type, from back at that time have unfortunately not been kept up. So it was awesome to see Silverback Park looking just like it did, 2014 or actually 2012, 2013 timeframe here. So to me, two different games, the Olympians and Capital City had a slow first half, and then all 5 goals were scored in the second half. Jenga and Brockton, to me, was a very physical game all through, and like I said here, obviously with the penalties and Brockton's 2 goals were scored on PKs here. Your thoughts so far on the UPSL Finals down there in Atlanta, and tomorrow, who do you expect to come out, hosting the trophy?
Well, to go back to just how this has gone, and I had never been to Silverbacks Park before, so for me, this is a first-time experience, and there is a lot of romance for, I think, lower league soccer fans when it comes to the NASL, and so being in a place that had a lot of memories from that was really cool to experience and to walk in and see it. It's absolutely beautiful. I won't say that it's not a little run down. There are some aspects that you can tell it's showing its age, but it's still amazing. It operates. It's just the whole facility there. All the practice fields are around there. It's an amazing place for a soccer team, and I very much hope we see a NISA side playing there soon. We shall see. There are rumors about that. But regardless, the soccer itself and the event that UPSL has thrown, while we don't have a lot of fans, of course, because of COVID, and that's probably a good thing, just until we get more people vaccinated and more safety measures in place. It's been an amazing, like the 2 matches that we saw were absolutely fun to watch. Teams are great. The level of talent was great. I was so impressed. I watched, I've talked about this a lot and maybe even on my social media, but just as the temperature dropped during the day, I was like kind of concerned for the night game because it got down to around 40 and I was like, I mean, listen, yes, people play matches in soccer, but they're not usually they play matches in soccer when it gets really cold. But like, I kind of feel bad for a young man running around. I'm always worried about muscle pulls and stuff like that. I asked the Brockton guys, they were watching the match before them. I asked them how they felt about that. They're like, "Oh, we're from Massachusetts. It's like summertime weather," and they're cracking up. Like, they're ready to go. I'm protected. I'm like, "Oh no, I'm good. I'm cold." But great match and looking forward to it. So when I walked in, the first team that I saw warming up was Olympians, and I was struck by how big some of those guys are. The UPSL sides that I've seen in West Texas, and maybe it's because of the population that they're drawing from there. Like my favorite club is Las Cruces, and I'm used to shorter guys. I'm used to people that these are full-grown men, like they're big dudes. So it'll be interesting to see. On the other hand, Jenga, who just rebranded, and I think I pushed through to their rebrands. I think they're technically, for the tournament, they're still Jenga because I don't think you're allowed to change your name during the tournament. Immediately. They're already wearing their new kits, though.
I saw that.
Atlanta, all the warm-ups, everything is all Atletico now. But They were the team that I was told coming in to watch for. They are the home team, and
they haven't lost.
They haven't lost. They're a good team, and their ball control, the way in which they move the ball, is really impressive. They're a very good club. Why not? Let's pick the home team. That's a fun one to do, and they'll be able to celebrate at home turf.
And so, just so, if you do want to catch it, it is on My Cujo. It does say the third place game kicks off around noon Eastern, which would be Capital City versus Brockton, and then the final, the championship game, will be Olympians FC from Mesa, Arizona, going against Ginga Atlanta, obviously from Atlanta, Georgia. But what I enjoyed is that both English and Spanish versions were on My Cujo. So I will give UPSL a big kudos. It was a fun time to watch it, and like I said here, so that's the positive to kick off the show. Then I'm going to do a quick dumpster fire here, and that's Charlotte. What the fuck is going on in Charlotte? You got MLS Charlotte MLS, and I don't remember their name, and I don't care to because of how they're trying to price gouge their season ticket members with their personal seat license, charging the supporter sections $50 on top of the MLS prices, which are hefty to begin with. Then you got the Charlotte Independents, which there's ownership issues between them and the supporters groups that's gone on for the last year, I think, pretty, for about that time frame. What's funny is probably this time last year, Ben, who goes by Soccer Goose on Twitter, actually did a tryout with them, highlighted and recorded and spoke very highly of it. And it seems like since then they've done everything they can to try to blow up the team, and that's with them moving into a better stadium. Downtown, supposed to. I thought initially would have been really good, help them stay alive, with Charlotte coming on, and then news this week with Stumptown coming back, which is positive. The thing that's not so positive, at least short term, and I'm hoping it's short term, is that it is NISA owned. But is there any other city in the United States at this point that is doing more to harm soccer than Charlotte?
Wow, that's pretty loaded.
Am I wrong?
Well, I can't think of anything at the moment, but I would say that I would say if I'm ranking those particular fires that you're ranking, certainly I feel like the Independence is the worst fire.
Oh, they're the worst. Yeah. To me, NISA being league owned is the best one. And his you would normally say, hey, that's not good. But when you're talking about Charlotte, it's, oh, hey, with the other two teams, I'm all right with that.
Well, I'll say this, and I told you before we recorded that we actually just talked about this a bit on the Night to Say NISA podcast, which is on Protagonist Podcast. If you look for it on Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your podcast, you'll find it. You can also follow us on Twitter. You got all those plugs. That's what I do. The interesting thing about the NISA issue. And I'll tell you that whenever I heard about it, and I'll give you credit, by the way, because you asked me a question and asked me to follow up on it. And I'm lucky enough to have some contacts that I can usually get information out if I really push hard. And it was like, oh, I wonder who owns these people, because it was clear that the old ownership had moved out. And then there was the change in branding and the subtle change in name from Stumptown Athletic to Stumptown Athletic Club, and like how that's slightly different. And then when I reached out to the league, it was like, oh yeah, the league owns them. And I was like, oh wow, like that is, at least from my perspective, and if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear from my perspective, that flies in the face of the ideals of NISA as far as I'm concerned. And this is supposed to be about independent clubs operating independently, we're working together for this league. well, if you have a league-owned club, that's not a club that could be independent in any way because it's owned by the league. And so, like, fundamentally, that bugged me. I mean, at some level, I'm still bugged by it. However, one of my co-hosts on the show, Dan Creel, I'll give him credit too because he's a smart fellow. Dan Creel suggested that no matter what your ideals are, you still have to live pragmatically. And pragmatically, it is you knew you had to have a certain number of teams to qualify for D3. And so because of that, propping up a team in the short term is something that you make the decision to do to protect yourself, protect the interest of the club, and protect the interest of the league. Now, the question I have, or maybe not the question, but the fears that I have are, this is exactly how MLS started, right? And I don't think NISA is MLS. And I think that there are better people in the room than with MLS, but there's also a lot of MLS people in that room. But like, it is hard not to think that if you look at those founding documents that came out of MLS, when they talk about the pyramid and like establishing promotion relegation, all the things they had intentions to do, all those were intentions that over time, pushed down a little bit more, until now Don Garber's, laughs whenever you ask him about that.
Yeah, he's shut it down.
I just think that it's a slippery slope when you start compromising on what makes you neat, what makes you different, what makes you independent. And so we'll see how it goes. But in the range of Charlotte, is it an earthquake, is it a hurricane, or a forest fire? I would think it's certainly the least damaging of the three things going on. Yeah, going on in Charlotte right now.
So to me, what caught my attention, and I know NISA doesn't like this because I think they're trying to separate it, but it felt very NASL-ish in how they did it. And that's why I reached out to you, because I was like, it felt that way. But I wasn't going to be the guy out, just call it learning on Twitter, we'll just say. Going to open up that can of worms. Even if you're right, it's a shit show. So
yeah. Well, let me speak to that just for a moment. I agree with you, and I would certainly be concerned about that if we were further down the road with NISA. But NISA has yet to be able to play a full season.
Yeah, they haven't played a full season.
And certainly the pandemic is not something that anyone could have planned for. No matter how stable your league is, even the most stable of leagues have struggled during this. So I think that we can cut them a little bit of slack. Now, maybe not forever, but maybe we can cut them a little slack in the moment and say that this is a pretty unplannable situation and they're reacting the best way they can to keep the league afloat. And of the teams that did exist, most of them are still there and most of them are still alive. So let's give some credit to that we don't have like a wholesale, this is literally
the cycle of clubs. And to
at least not yet.
To me, like I said here, the reason I thought it was going to cause more of a storm, when it came out, but I think people were, like you said, there's a lot of stuff that's going on, and I know I'm probably Mr. USL, and hey, that's where my club is, so I support that league right now, and I know they rival, if you want to call it, is. I don't think there's the ugliness between NASL and USL back at that time frame, partly because they didn't split. I'm hoping that in the future there'll be more working together, more friendlies and stuff, like we're starting to see this year. But to me, reason why I didn't go all super crazy on it is, number one, I didn't know if it had to do with United States Soccer, PL, the requirements, you got to have, like in Division II, you have to have, go from 8 to 10 teams. I didn't know if that was it. And then, Chris came and said, no, hey, it's, for D3, it's still 8. So for me, I think it's a good play. And I also think it's smart because if it's done right, and I know you got Carrie Taylor there, and I know you know the other two. I don't know them by name, but I know Carrie Taylor. She's involved with it. It's going to be a well-run. It's going to be successful, which if you're trying to sell that, and let's be honest, Charlotte is a market that does support soccer. I think they've always supported soccer, even with shitty ownership in USL. The independents have always had pretty good, not great, but pretty good, support. And that was when they were at Mecklenburg, where NISA is going to be playing, Stumptown's going to be playing. So I do think that short term, it's okay. Like I said here, there's no issues. Just to me, when it comes to Charlotte, of all the places for them to do it, and I believe I asked you this, and like I said here, I'm assuming it's on the podcast, which I haven't listened to, is for them to choose Charlotte over, to me, like I put out Providence, and I don't know if they've got their ducks in a row to be able to do that, or Atlanta. But, I've heard the reason, at least unofficially, that I heard while Silverback Park isn't available is because there's so many games that are going on there. I think with the whole UPSL Georgia or Atlanta area plays there, and then there's the rec leagues on Sunday that play there. So for NISA to be able to get time there may be a little bit more of a challenge than you would normally think. So, but I couldn't do the show without bringing up Charlotte, just because for this week it was a dumpster fire, and like I said here, NISA being league owned is the brightest spot of it, and that tells you how bad of a week it is for Charlotte.
Agreed.
But speaking of NISA, you're who I go to when it comes to NISA. So as they're getting ready to kick off, I think about a month, right? 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks before they do the preseason. Well, I guess it's not a preseason tournament. The tournament in Chattanooga. What's kind of new this year? From reports that I've seen, Cosmos are on hiatus. You got Stumptown in 1904, FC that's came in. One of my favorite teams, Maryland Bobcats, have moved up and will be playing this year. You got expansion with Chicago House AC, and I got to admit, their scarf, I already got it. It's awesome. Job well done. They're supposed to come in the fall, as well as with New Jersey Teamsters with the Z. And then they also announced Flower City Union up in Rochester, which will be playing where the old Rhinos used to play, but they're coming in next spring of 2022. So there's a lot of positives in there. I think the big negative is a big negative with the Cosmos. But your thoughts on all the changes within NISA for this year?
Well, you made the list for me, so you've already done the outline. In high school, you had to write the outline first. And then
I have it right here.
You already did all that for me. Thank you for that. Well, I think that everyone is excited about Maryland Bobcats, or MD Bobcats, as they would say. That is the club that, they just say all they do is win. We'll see how they do in NISA. This club is well built, and I'm a big fan. I think. If you're a fan of soccer, you're a fan of this club. They just have done things the right way, and you've seen it over and over again. They're minority owned. The players that they have are all from the Maryland area so far anyway. So they're really working to develop that area of soccer. I think that's cool to see. It's not the only model that works, but it is a good model. And it certainly is the kind of model that would help fans attach to you. Because, if your brother, your cousin, your friend is playing for that team, that's a reason to show up and watch. So I'm excited for all of that. I think that Maryland is a club that was only expected to participate in the playoff or the tournament, and then it's been decided that they're going to be playing in the season as well. So that's exciting too. This is, I think it'll be cool to see. I agree with you that the Cosmos is a negative, and that is a concern, obviously. I think there are. Here's what I'll say.
Those concerns are not NISA related, though. I will say that. It has nothing to do with NISA. It has to do with the ownership and, what Rocco invested, over in Serie A, and that's where his focus is. And I'm a supporter of Rocco because he has the lawsuit against, USSF trying to open things up. And, not to bring up dirty laundry, but I think he was done dirty by both NASL at the time for not giving him full disclosures, as well as USSF by shutting down, NASL, for me. But
I'm with you. I hear that part, and I don't have a massive chip on my shoulder against Rocco. I think he's done amazing things for American soccer at times. Here's the problem I have with Rocco. So after saying I don't have a problem with him, I do have a slight problem. Funding the New York Cosmos to be competitive in NISA is a drop in the bucket for his total net worth. And so it would not be that difficult for him to untie the purse strings just a little bit. Like, just let a few coins fall out, hand those Eric's over, let him build a lineup and compete in this league. But he doesn't take it serious now, or at least that's the impression that he's giving. Because it seems to me that he does not care about the team, the legacy. And that was something that you always thought he did care about.
Yes.
You always felt like, you always got the perception that he did. And it seems to me that for the cost that would, what it would cost to keep this team functioning is nothing compared to running a team in Serie A or all of the other things he does with his cash. So I guess it's a little frustrating from that perspective because it's just a buy-in. For you and I, maybe we can't fund a team in NISA, but for Rocco, that would cost him nothing. So there is, and I agree with you 100% what you said. The problems with the Cosmos have very little to do with NISA. They existed before NISA. If NISA fails, then they'll exist after NISA. The issues, there are just major problems with that club and the way it's running. Maybe it needs to be handed over to somebody else. I don't know. It's hard. I know that there are a lot of supporter groups in New York that are calling for that now. Does that happen? I don't know. I'll tell you something you didn't mention. Yes, I am fired up for New Amsterdam. New Amsterdam has done a lot of cool signings over this. In fact, picking up Letty Bargett from the Cosmos, as well as some other players. I think they're going to flesh out their club. I'm a big fan of what Max is doing in that lineup. I think that we could see them be certainly more competitive than they were in the fall, in that they weren't very competitive in the fall.
I think that's why I didn't add them, because they already played.
Well, I think it's fair. Listen, the cool thing about this league, and maybe it's also a negative, but I think it's also a cool thing, is that because the contracts are basically season to season, year to year, you can see a team really change quickly based off how they use that, how they operate, and the way in which they bring in talent. So I'm excited to see that. I feel
they were the team that the owner would sub in as goalie, right? If memory serves me correct, a couple of times.
It's not a fond memory for any of us that are watching these matches. You see him be competitive in the first half, and the second half it would get really ugly. However, that got cleared up, and I think that there's been more control over the lineup in a more professional way. At least so far, that's what it appears. And on top of that, they signed a contract with Icarus FC I think they're releasing their kit tonight. Yeah, I think they're releasing their brand new kit tonight or tomorrow. It's this weekend. And I know that when I spoke with Robbie from Icarus about that, he said that they were wild even for what he does, which it makes me excited to see what we're going to see from them. So
are they going to be the Las Vegas Lights of
I hope not. I don't want to talk about it.
I'm just talking kit wise.
I was never a fan of the Las Vegas Lights approach to things. You can be American and you can be exciting and all those things and not be grossly American. You could be when I travel in Europe, I don't put Zubas on and Crocs and I don't dress like that because I am American. You'll be able to tell from my accent right away, but it doesn't mean I have to be the offensive, gross American that's complaining that my apartment's not big enough or this food isn't big enough because I only eat big things because I'm from America. I guess that's what I'm saying. So I was always bothered by the lights because I was throwing the money out of the helicopter and the llamas and
the llamas were actually kind of pretty cool. I will give the llamas credit. They were unique. They're like Florida, or not Florida, but Ford Madison, and the cow that they have, and that had the calf that they name. It's kind of unique because it's unique to that, to that team. If everybody else starts doing it, it was all the other stuff. Like last year, they were scheduled to have a different kit for every home game. That was what they were going to do. Now, obviously that didn't come to play due to COVID.
Maybe that's why COVID happened. It was God's way of stopping this from happening, keeping us from having to suffer through that.
Even the die-hard, USL guys will be like, when it comes to the lights, they're like, yeah, no. So
Yeah, they're a little over the top for me, but I am a fan.
There's always one.
I'm a fan of teams having good fun. I also think that
keep it professional.
Yeah, like look like a soccer club. Be a soccer club. Like, come on. Like you don't have to. You're not minor league baseball, you know.
Yes. Now, so here's a question for you. I'll put you, commissioner of NISA here.
John Price, move over.
How does NISA fill in from the Mississippi West? Because you got what, 3 West Coast teams? You got the Upper Midwest. You got Stumptown now, but
Southeast. Yeah.
The middle of the United States, the flyover states, the mountains, there's nothing. So, and to be fair, as we discussed earlier, they've unfortunately yet to be able to play a full season. So I know it's quote year 3, but how many times can you have a first year when you haven't had really a first year? And I personally will be excited when they can have a normal full season that goes from fall to spring, like they want, because unlike most other soccer teams or soccer leagues in the United States, they're going with the FIFA calendar, fall to spring, unlike us that go spring to fall there. So,
well, I think that again, going back to like the ideals of the league. The core principle of the league is that you have to find that investor who's willing to put a club, find a city, an area that will support the club. And so when you operate that way, there are challenges, right? It comes down to it. Like you've got to find that person with money that's willing to do this thing. You have to find the right situation for your league. And I know that there are people much smarter than you or I who are trying to solve this problem for NISA.
Yes. For all of lower league soccer.
Yeah, sure. Right. You're all agreed. I'm curious. I think that like if I was commissioner, you made me commissioner, so thank you for your vote. I tell you, I mean, again, maybe I'm a dum-dum here, but like, why don't you go after some USL League One teams right now? Mm-hmm. Like you don't have the same kind of buy-in / operational cost that those leagues are going to require. Like you could go in and recruit some of these clubs into your league, and we're already seeing friendlies between USL clubs and NISA clubs. So I don't think that there is the animosity that we sometimes see among fans towards USL. I don't think that's the way that the people in the boardroom at USL see it. So I don't know why that's one way around this, because they have investors that want to have a club here. So now it's a matter of just getting them into your league. I don't understand why, given what's in St. Louis, why don't we have a club in St. Louis? Like you already have. I mean, you know what I mean? Like
Soccer Park is right there. Toyota Stadium or Toyota Park is right there.
All the issues that you've had with the USL team, kind of like just basically giving up and then converting to an MLS. Like there is so much like raw emotion there, and St. Louis is a great soccer town. That's what we hear every time, right? That's a great soccer town. So you need to have a club there. You need to find an investor and get that in there. Like start, and I will tell you, as much as I want to see the Midwest fill in, I think that I can think of several potential spots in the state of Texas that could use a club, and then of course. I think that you could put. I mean, I don't see why you couldn't do Austin, San Antonio, Fort Worth, maybe even Waco, maybe 2 clubs in the Dallas area. I mean, you could put a full region right here in the state of Texas. I'm not in the state of Texas right now. Okay, well anyway, in the state of Texas. But I also think that the secondary and maybe the more pressing issue beyond wanting to fill in that map is filling out the West Coast, which is you've got 3 clubs out there. Oakland Roots obviously was going to be your cornerstone. Mm-hmm. They dipped and headed the USL Championship, and that's I always joke about it, but like I joke about it because all the things that NISA fans trumpeted about Oakland Roots, now we see USL fans doing and USL media doing it. So it's funny because it's like we did that first. But it is. I certainly think that we need to have more clubs in the state of California. maybe up the Pacific Coast. There's lots of soccer culture there, and you have to remember with the NISA side, well, an MLS side might draw, like a Portland or a Seattle can draw 40, 50,000 fans. NISA only needs to draw 5 or 6, 7 to be competitive. So, just finding the right scenario and getting a club into some of these sort of soccer hotbeds in the country just makes sense right now. And I agree with you. I think it is a concern of every NISA fan, but we should also be careful. We're seeing NISA expand on a regular basis, and we've actually talked about we've talked about leagues that overexpand or expand too quickly. Yes. Like maybe we should give NISA some credit in that they're adding 1 or 2 sides over the course of each year, and they have grown. They have added clubs. Aside from the Philly Fury debacle that happened at the very beginning of NISA.
Philly and Atlanta are the two ones where you're like, you kind of scratch your head on it. And Atlanta's still, I guess, still active-ish.
Dan Creel interviewed John Prutch right after the announcement about Stumptown, and according to Prutch, this Commissioner John Prutch, he says that the Atlanta club is still in play. That's going to happen. So I'll break a rumor to you and your listeners. Okay, I'll break a rumor.
Which is
this is a rumor. Hey, you know what?
You got to start somewhere.
It's paying off if they're listening. The rumor is, and this is a rumor, so I'm just, is that it might be King Atlanta. Might be that club that is prepared to jump into NISA. That's the word that I heard this weekend. Now, did I hear it from UPSL folks? No, I did not. I'm sure they wouldn't be thrilled about that, considering they West Maryland do that, right? But there is a lot of connective tissue between some of the Atlanta sports movers and shakers here and Ginga now at Mexico. It's going to be interesting to see if that's what's going on here. Maybe so. It looks like a talented group. That would be kind of cool to see. The question is whether or not, everything, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And maybe that rumor is full of crap. Maybe I just made it up. But that is what I heard. I did not make it up. So that'll be interesting to see. But Atlanta's supposed to be in play, and apparently they're working on finding a home. Now, is that home working on something with Silverbacks Park, as you described it, and this is what I've heard even this weekend, what I've heard is that Silverbacks Park is basically packed Monday through Sunday. And I'll tell you, even while the UPSL Finals are going on, like the fields behind the stadium, which are
above it,
packed. I mean, I even was watching a match over the back of the stands while I was waiting on something, and it is wild how many people are there playing soccer right now.
But that's awesome. That's like what Championship Park is in Orange County, where you've got the main stadium, and then you've got all the fields and around it that are just as busy. So I think that's a positive. The
size of the facility at Silverbacks Park it's massive, and maybe that would be difficult to match. But I certainly can see this as a model for an owner who wants to have a facility surrounded by practice fields. You can fill it up with local leagues and make money even when your stadium is not in use. It certainly feels like a model that we should see more of. Maybe we don't. Maybe for whatever reason, we just don't.
So the main reason why I wanted to have you on is I obviously fly the USL colors, and not that I don't support NISA, I do. But my club is in USL, and I call it a club, not a franchise, and we can argue the semantics of that. What makes, in your view, NISA more attractive than USL?
So I'll be transparent in saying that the arguments that often get repeated about MLS and USL and NISA and NPSL, UPSL, you name it, they get tired at some level because the individual fans of clubs very rarely, even as you described it, Your club is playing the USL. You didn't pick the USL for your club. Your club picked the UPSL, or you picked the USL, and that's the club that you're a fan of. I think that we often draw a line so deep in the sand that we're falling into them because we're trying to prove how righteous or how independent we are. And I guess the longer I've sort of followed the sport, the more I see that working together could lead to a lot more than tearing each other apart all the time.
Yes.
Just like watching these NISA friendlies coming up against USL sides. I don't know. I haven't seen Detroit City's schedule as they tune up for the season, but it'd be really cool to see them play a USL side. I just am curious how their fans would feel about it. And there are other teams with. I mean, think about the team in Chattanooga and their personal acts that have got to grind with the USL.
That's a difference. I won't. I'll be upfront. When the Chattanooga news first broke, I was more on Team Red, we'll say. But the more news that's came out, it's hard to support Team Red, and that's why I bought a Chattanooga FC scarf, and I won't buy even though I'm a USL guy, I doubt I'd buy a Red Wolf scarf, even though, and I know this might not be popular to say, even though I think the Red Wolves are doing things right for them by building their stadium, by investing in that corner of the area. The problem is how they got there, and that's it's just like Austin FC, up the road from San Antonio. I respect, I follow them. I've become friends with Las Verdes, the supporters group, and they're a bunch of great guys. But to support the team, to pay any money for Austin FC, I couldn't do it. So I understand why Chattanooga, especially Team Blue, will not do it. Now, I do think they need to stop being petty and play them at some point, because it's going to happen. And the longer you put it off, through there. But Chattanooga is a separate issue.
The Chattanooga issue, I think fundamentally, if you're a NISA fan, NISA supporter, you have to believe that any club can be next door to you if they can find the funding for it, right? Like fundamentally, that's what NISA argues. And the problem with the Red Wolves is their approach was basically to try to steal out all of the talent that was making Chattanooga be so successful there. They went in and were like stole from the program. And I say stole, maybe that's not the best word, but
there was some shadiness. We'll say there was some shadiness.
And that's the issue that I think NISA would definitely argue. Certainly, that's what Chattanooga would argue, right? That's not it's not the same thing because of that. But I think that there's something to be said for the Wild West nature of NISA right now, and it probably will not always be that way. You could probably go 10 years from now or 5 years from now, and it won't be that Wild Westy right now. But if I'm an owner picking a place, like maybe being in a situation where you can truly do whatever you want as far as your club is concerned, is kind of exciting. And I think that there's something to be said from that versus maybe the more corporate structure of the USL and the
cookie cutter.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, there are some outliers in that, right? I mean, we talked about Las Vegas, right? So I'm not saying that, I don't think the USL is as cookie cutter as MLS, which is as cookie cutter as you can get, right? Everyone gets a white kit.
Yeah, we're not talking MLS.
I'm talking that.
That's a whole separate beast.
Yeah, but NISA is a place where you can do all kinds of crazy things, even including, even some of the ownership structure. There have been implications. You can do a fan-owned club. Like, that's kind of cool. Like, you're not going to get a lot of places where that's going to be allowed or possible outside of NISA, and that's kind of exciting. So I think that there's a lot of life right now in NISA. Like, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of buzz. If you were on the next say NISA, would say there's a lot of juice. And Chris Kessel is the juice, by the way. But we like to talk about how juicy things are, and like NISA has that right now. It's really exciting. Who knows what's coming next? We don't know. Even the idea of starting your season with effectively a preseason tournament, right? But like starting it with a tournament, then having a regular season, then your playoffs, it's kind of fun. Like that is an interesting approach. Like I feel like there's a lot of people at that table in NISA that are willing to think outside of the box consistently. I'm not in love with the name Chicago House, and I've said that. But the way they went about that and fan involvement and trying to tie it to the local community in a way that felt transparent, felt authentic, felt like a real approach to allow people to really have a voice, that goes a long way towards making your fan base and not even your fan base, but also your league itself. It goes on to creating excitement around that. And so I'm very excited. I think that I'm excited about NISA. USL feels, it's very expensive to participate in USL.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a New Rock, then maybe that's what you wanted all along, right? You wanted to be able to charge that much. And I guess I understand that. And they're getting the money, right? So that's another thing.
So when I put my list together, because I put together a list, and this goes back to my NASL years, where there was my con about NISA, and it hasn't been proven, so to be fair, is the league office, because going from NASL to the league office of USL, love it or you hate it, there's that foundation there where clubs can get support if they need it, at least a minimum support. And then hopefully you have clubs that go above it. With NASL, you had some clubs that did really well, and then you had some clubs that you're like, I can't watch it. It's just the production, what wasn't there, and that's my fear with NISA, with it being kind of the Wild West, is nobody has concerns about Detroit City, Chattanooga. I think LA Force and Cal United last year proved that they can put on a good show, and even New Amsterdam, I caught a couple of their matches, which were good quality on Mike Kuju, and then they had the playoffs on BN, and I've heard rumors that may or may not be back on BN. That'll be to be determined. That's my concern is. Because as a league, you want to have some sort of consistency as a bottom level, and then have teams that eclipse it. Like Phoenix Rising, I think, Lou City, they rival, if not do things just as well as MLS teams do. And then you've got other teams, and Tulsa's made a huge step up in their production. Then you've got Charlotte again that does the basics for that here. And that's my concern with NISA is, as a fan of the league, there's nothing more frustrating than, especially if it's an away match, not being able to watch it or running into technical bugs and stuff like that, which I don't think NISA had that as of yet. And that's why I said it's still a little bit, kind of unproven, but, that's my concern when you have the Wild West, as you say, from the history of NASL, and did NISA learn from it? Because to be fair, it seems like a lot, at least initially, a lot of it was kind of NASL 3.0, which quickly faded away, and then it was NISA 2.0, NISA 3.0, I think was the final version before it came out, right? There was 2 or 3 different owner changes and different ideas.
The only slight pushback that I would push towards you is that, again, we've yet to see a full season. While we are 3 years in, they haven't been normal years, and so that creates like a complicated problem with how do you measure the success of the league? What are you looking for?
Right.
And I think your argument is sound. I think it is, right? If you worry about teams cycling out the bottom half of the league, yes, you're right. There are what I would describe as the tent post clubs. I think Oakland could have been one of those clubs. They chose not to be. But certainly there are 3 or 4 clubs that we count on that those clubs are not going to go away.
Right.
And then it's a matter of filling in around it and hopefully making those clubs be exciting in their own way, whatever that is. Or maybe they win the tournament. I don't know. I'm saying, but like, you need to, like, it is interesting that the 4 clubs that ended the fall playoffs in the semifinals were Chattanooga, Detroit, and then you had LA Force and Oakland Roots.
Right.
And those, at least if you had asked me who were the 4 strongest clubs in the league, probably I would have named 3 of those 4 clubs. And so that's interesting when you think about that it sort of ended as predicted. And so I guess my goal, or how I would measure success long term, is how often do you see that club, say in New Amsterdam, who struggled last season to win, start rising up the ranks, ending up towards the top and finishing, in the semifinals or something. That's what you kind of want to see, because even a club like Michigan Stars, like, it is totally fine for people to, at least in my perspective, to disagree with the political opinions of the people in charge there. That's kind of okay as long as that person is holding up their side of the bargain in the league and doing their part. Maybe you could argue, well, I don't think that's right. Well, okay, I don't think that every part of the country is exactly the same way. Right. And I don't think that there's only, and again, to go back to the principles of NISA, I don't think that NISA would tell you that a club owner or a club leadership has to all be the same. So I think that, some of the criticisms of Michigan Stars some of them are fair, and politically, I find that repugnant, and I certainly disagree with personal political opinions. The ownership there, but as far as them existing as a citizen, as a member of the league, unless they're doing some unethical thing with their players.
But they had a good year last year, though, right? They were top of the table for I think a couple of weeks, and then they faded down. They faded down the stretch.
They did, and let's not forget that when the playoffs opened, they, as I described it, they punched NGS in the mouth. Not NGS. Let's correct that. So I was saying this to NGS, and they got mad at me. That's what I meant to say. But they punched Detroit City in the mouth, and it was not expected. There's been a lot of talk going this match, and NGS loves that competition. They love to be able to really to make fun of Michigan Stars, and I think that's great. That's great for the league. You want rivalries, and whatever they're based off of. And in that way, NGS does really great things for the league because it gets it. Social media is buzzing. People are talking about it. Everyone knows who the Northern Guard supporters are. Even MLS sites know about them.
Everybody
that's a big deal. That's a big deal. The league needs NGS as much as Detroit City needs NGS. And so I guess to get back to what I was saying is, whenever the Michigan Stars sort of flipped the script there and won that first match, obviously, of course, they got out of the playoffs, and Detroit City won the championship, so we can acknowledge that. But that's what you want. You want these big time competitions, and even where your most hated club, or the club that's the black sheep of the league, you want them to be competitive and play well in matches. Even if it's to play the bad guy. Darth Vader is important to the story of Star Wars, right? You need these people, and I don't know that Michigan Stars with Darth Vader. That wasn't really my point. But my point is that you need the antithesis of whatever your protagonist, whoever your protagonist is, whoever that is. But yeah, and yes, kudos to Detroit City. I know that I said that they did lose that opening match and then ran the table and won the championship and should be playing in the U.S. Open Cup, hopefully. So we'll see.
Well, I think they'd have to be. We'll see.
That's been my argument.
We'll see. What NISA does, but I think there's.
Please tell me that they get to host a match at Keyworth with fans and have an MLS side come to town. Do you know how much MLS has tried to get into Detroit? How amazing that would be! I mean, it would be beautiful.
Could you imagine if it's Cincinnati? Because they already have history, and from my understanding, it's not a very positive history.
There's just, I just think that there are some great storylines in NISA that, as a person, of course I follow NISA, so maybe I know the storylines better. But I don't know a USL storyline aside from what's going on in Charlotte right now. I don't really know. I don't. There's just a buzz around NISA that's fun to follow. Part of it is the uncertainty, and I think that you're sort of hinting at that may be an issue, and I think that's a fair criticism.
I don't think it's an issue. I just think I think for me, because I first fell in love with soccer when the Scorpions came in. Prior to that, I had really no history with the game, and I was there, with Gordon Hartman, from the beginnings, at Morgan's Wonderland, saying, "Hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going here." I know he had Don Garber in, to Toyota Field when it first opened up, and even back then, he was like, "Hey, I can get it to here," but to take the next steps, he wasn't, his goals weren't that. But that's where I fell in love with the game is in NASL and, that independence. And, that was Wild Wild West where you had players being traded for hotel rooms and transportation. That's a true story. With the Florida Strikers, got, rest their soul, for that here. But that's where I fell in love with the game. And then, going to, I won't lie to you, I was a typical NASL homer guy. We're like, oh, USL, no. And then, of course, the Scorpions folded, however you want to call it. And then SAFC was born, and, I kept my same seats, same players, different coach. Well, now we have the same coaches we had with them. And, if you love the game, you support your team. And there's the transactional side of US soccer, which I think anybody anybody that follows the game hates. I think even outside of the most diehard MLS fanboys, I think if you did a poll, I think you would find most of them be like, "Hey, it needs to be a more equitable, federation." But they don't listen to people like you and me, unfortunately, for that here. But to me, it's for NISA. I think they are a must because it pushes USL to be better. And, no offense to NISA, fans, USL pushes, NISA to be better as well. And what I want to see, and whether it happens or not happens, is where you have, because the only way I think you can overtake MLS is to have the lower divisions unite. That is going to be the only way that you can do it. And you're not going to be able to rely on the federation to help that. So you've got to have smart people that, and I know this is tough, that look beyond just the mighty dollar. And that's the problem with USL. Even, I love my club, but that's the problem with USL is, where does the money, the 10 million that, the expansion teams go to, where does it go? Nobody really knows. And that's the problem. And that's why I'm excited for NISA. And my fear is that once they get that foundation built, then you're going to start to see, to get in, to be invited, you got, it's got to be there now. Where I think that NISA's kind of changed is, unlike USL, NISA's working with the grassroots organizations. They're working with the regional teams or regional leagues, pardon me. And now they're not working with like UPSL, National Soccer League as of yet, but more the really regional ones like Gulf Coast. And I think Midwest Premier, I think they're working with as well, and a few others. So to me, that's the part that's got me excited is you can see NISA's kind of took USL's kind of, and I won't say their approach, but we need to have more than just one level of a league to be able to sustain. You've got to be able to have this pipeline, whether it's USL League 2 to League 1 to Championship to wherever. You can see NISA starting to lay that foundation. And, like I said here, I'm excited to see how it'll work out. I don't think the leagues are really, at the club level, I don't think the leagues are different at all. I think, you go to a fan experience, at San Antonio, you go to a fan experience at Detroit City. Hopefully that, the environments are different because of the supporter groups, but the game day, hopefully it's very similar. Unlike an unlike an MLS game where it's dry. It's I've been to Dallas, I've been to Houston, and I know they're not the perfect examples, and we'll see how Austin is. But I'll take USL and being that close to the field. More important, the player interaction that you get at this level is you can't beat it. In my opinion, MLS I have a feeling if you go England, getting access to League One, League Two players is a whole lot different than the English Premier League. So, it comes with the paycheck. I understand that. But thank you for coming on, Dan. Like I said here, I thought it was a fun conversation. Like I said here, I've been a fan of yours for 2-3 years before that here. So, any final thoughts that you have?
I'm excited to see more shows like this. It's the idea of getting different voices on and talking about different leagues. I think it's important. I think that cross fan base connection needs to start getting made more often. Mm-hmm. I think that while tribalism is important, I also think that there has to be some worldviews that allow us to expand a little bit and see the value of different perspectives, even if we disagree fundamentally. Allowing ourselves, and I don't think that you and I fundamentally disagree, but there are some that do. But I just think that it's vital that we have more conversations in the soccer world. I just, in every level, I just think it comes down to, you watch some of the territorial skirmishes that happen between leagues, really at every level. If it's UPSL, if it's UPSL, NPSL, if it's UPSL, NPSL, and these, sort of regionals that are popping up, if it's the regionals brushing up against each other, like we see this over and over and over again, and too often that the conversations degenerate into, like trolling each other or mocking each other. And it'd be much better if we try to be productive and come up with solutions. But I wish for a better world, and I'll keep trying to make it happen. So thank you for having me on, though. I appreciate it.
Hey, no worries, Dan. Thank you for your time, and especially taking out. I know you've got a busy weekend there in Atlanta, and I'm not sure if you have other plans on a Saturday night.
I'm ready to go back to Texas. Is what I'm ready to do. I'll be back in Texas tomorrow night. I'm excited for that. I miss Texas.
So, but thank you for coming on. Thank you for tuning in, and like I said here, I'll for that here. Appreciate it.